Good morning, St. Francis. Good morning, people of God. It is Thursday, the 25th day of January, 2024, Thursday of the third week of the year, the third week in Ordinary Time. Today, though, we also celebrate the conclusion of the week of prayer for Christian unity with the feast of the conversion of St. Paul the Apostle. So coming to you this morning from a very rainy courtyard here at our school, the Franciscan School. We had morning prayer inside today because a variety of rain bands are coming by. And so there's the back of the great statue of St. Francis and the Wolf of Gubbio that graces our courtyard once again over there. So still winter, although it's going to be like 78 today, and it's a little bit ridiculous in January to be 78 degrees, but it's still winter. The trees have not yet come into bloom, and they should not because it's January. So hopefully the cold weather will return, or just the more temperate weather will return soon. But as we celebrate the conversion of Paul, in case you never knew, there are two different narratives in the Acts of the Apostles that speak of Paul's conversion. There is the narrative itself that kind of Luke offers within writing Acts of the Apostles, because he's the traditionally the author of Acts. But then there is also the words of Paul himself as he speaks of his own conversion and what that was like to be thrown off the horse. And in both cases, Jesus, saying, the voice of Christ saying to him, "Why are you persecuting my church?" Again, we would either, and both are choices today for the first reading. But the point of both of these is that, again, God takes something that would seem to be abhorrent to God's plan. A man who was murderously persecuting Christians left and right and delighting in it, it seemed, and feeling as though he was doing something justifiable and something that, again, God would approve of, getting rid of any kind of difference or diversion or some kind of again, aberration that could happen to Judaism. And yet Christ, God, basically says, though this is a man, because of his intensity and his fortitude in wanting to persecute Christians, he can now be immediately turned into somebody who becomes one of the greatest missionaries of Christianity. And that is what happens. So it is always the sense, again, how God uses what we think is to be discarded, or maybe even ourselves to be persecuted or destroyed or gotten rid of. And God can take that and reshape that. That has to always ring true with us. Again, as much as our church at times wants to kind of remind us of our sinfulness and our brokenness, because that seems to give church a power that is problematic in some ways. It is not just about focusing upon, one's sins and leaving them at that, or one's brokenness and leaving it at that. It is, how can God transform this? How can God transform these things that we have done, that we may not be proud of, that we may not like, and turn them into wonder and beauty, as God did with Paul. Now, again, Paul always still brought with him Paul, and again, he was a little bit sexist, a little bit anti-feminist, of course, because everybody was in those days and age. But even with Paul's, and he could also talk forever, and he was a bit of a braggart. But God takes all of that still, keeping Paul, but uses what redirects Paul's purpose, redirects how Paul understands himself and what his relationship is with God and with God's people. It can happen to us. It does happen to us. We just have to be aware of it. And continue to move with God's guidance into what it is that we're supposed to become. Mark's gospel that accompanies the first reading today for the feast of the conversion of St. Paul is a bit, again, it's bizarre. Again, it's Mark's gospel, and so it's Mark in kind of his bare bones, sensationalist, exaggerative, whatever way of describing how Jesus preached. And this is the one, again, if you dare to become my disciple, if you dare to become one of my followers, you'll be able to drink deadly poison and handle serpents, and nothing will ever happen to you. And so many people have tried to do that, and so many people have died. So don't get kooky with your faith. That's basically about it. Mark uses exaggeration, he uses hyperbole, basically to stress the idea that truly things may be possible for us that we might not thought possible before we embraced God. We should not, though, use that in some ways to do things that would harm us in the end, or do things that would cause us to be hurt in some ways. Because if we are harmed, if we are hurt, if we die, then basically our purpose on this earth is kind of short-circuited, and we cannot do what it is that God wants us to do with our faith. Be people who believe is the bottom line, and out of that belief, see what is possible with God's Spirit working within you. A blessed day, St. Francis and people of God, on this feast of the conversion of St. Paul. May the Lord give you his peace as these jumbo jets fly over.